The story of how one of the world's most popular video games found its way to players around the globe. Businessman Hank Rogers and Tetris inventor Alexei Pajitnov joined forces in the USSR, risking it all to bring Tetris to the masses. This is how IMDb describes the 2023 Tetris movie. I had the pleasure to see it 3 times, and I just knew that when I first saw this movie, everything fell into place. I'm sorry for that one. This movie released on Apple's streaming service and was a blast for me personally, and was a great cinematic retelling of the original story. In this video, I'll tell you why this movie was so good as it is, and why you should watch it. Without further ado, let's get into it. For the people who haven't seen the Tetris movie yet, and do not want to be spoiled, the first couple of minutes of the story will have spoilers, because I'm literally telling the plot. If you do want to see that, just keep watching. If you do not want to see that, skip ahead to the next part of the video, which is shown in the YouTube chapter system. In 1988, Hank Rogers of Bulletproof Software marketed his newest video game at the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas. While there, he instead becomes enamored with the game Tetris, created by Soviet programmer Alexei Pajitnov, who works for the government-owned E-Lorg in the Soviet Union. Rogers explains to a bank manager that Robert Stein of Andromeda Software had obtained worldwide licensing rights to Tetris from E-Lorg, and signed a contract with media tycoon Robert Maxwell and his son, CEO of Microsoft, Kevin Maxwell, allowing them to distribute Tetris in exchange for game royalties. Meanwhile, the Microsoft representative at the show in Las Vegas had sold Rogers the Tetris rights in Japan for PC, console, and arcade. Rogers obtains an audience with Nintendo CEO Hiroshi Yamauchi and proposes a partnership to produce Tetris for Nintendo cartridges and arcade machines. Shortly after beginning production, Rogers receives a call from Kevin explaining that the arcade rights had already been promised to Sega. Rogers returns to Yamauchi, asking for his residuals in advance. Instead, he is sent to Nintendo of America headquarters in Seattle and shown Nintendo's upcoming handheld device, the Game Boy, which is planned to be released with Super Mario Land. Rogers convinces President Minoru Arakawa and Senior Vice President Howard Lincoln to package it with Tetris instead, and promises to obtain handheld licensing rights. He travels to meet with the Maxwells in London, who tell him that Stein retains all worldwide licensing rights. Rogers offers Stein $25,000 for the worldwide handheld rights, which he seemingly accepts. Later, however, Arakawa and Lincoln call Rogers explaining that Stein has now promised the handheld rights to Atari for $100,000. Kevin learns about this, and while Stein promises to obtain the rights, both Kevin and Rogers decide to travel to Moscow to personally obtain them instead. Rogers, Stein, and Kevin each separately meet Valentin Trifonov, head of Soviet Ministry of Foreign Affairs and members of the Central Committee of the Communist Party, setting off a bidding war to obtain handheld rights for Tetris whilst under the watchful eye of the KGB. I don't like to use Wikipedia as a source of information, but I found it difficult to write this myself, and this story is actually correct and is approved by me. While watching the movie for the first time, there were some things that I really enjoyed. For instance, when a new person or place is introduced, the movie shoots to 8-bit graphics, which is a very subtle nod to the original Tetris graphics on the Game Boy. This is a recurring feature and is also used to make things clear. The music in this movie was also amazing. The original Tetris music was remixed into multiple different genres and remade with multiple different BPMs, which is just a good way to implement the original game into this movie. There were also some remakes of older songs like Holding Out for a Hero and The Final Countdown that were made in Russian to fit the vibe of the movie, which is set in Soviet Russia. The casting for this movie was great as well. Sure, it could have been better, but it was pretty good. Taron Egerton does a great job at capturing the adventures Hank goes on through this movie, and Alexei is portrayed perfectly by Nikita Yefremov. Overall, I thought this movie was pretty great, since I knew the backstory before watching it, and seeing it being made into a Hollywood action movie is just amazing. Obviously, not everything in this movie actually happened, but the main business story was based on real events. This movie was a real masterpiece, and I would recommend it to anybody who hasn't sold their soul to Apple yet. Thank you for watching this video. I really felt like ranting about the Tetris movie today because I loved it. Again, the plot was directly copied from Wikipedia and slightly altered by me to fit in some things they left out. Also, I may have changed the Wikipedia page after this. If you like this video, please show it by pressing the thumbs up button and consider subscribing to the channel because it helps me out a lot. With that being said, I wish you all a good rest of your day and I'll see you on the next one.